Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry to have to start on this tone, but essentially almost everything she said has just been wrong. She has suggested that we were unable to draw conclusions from last year's pilots, and that is simply not the case. Both the Cabinet Office's evaluation and that of the Independent Electoral Commission, which she may wish to dispute, I don't know, but they are nonetheless the Independent Electoral Commission, concluded that the pilots did what they set out to do. They were a success in that the overwhelming majority of people went to be able to cast their vote with no impediment. And what's more, and here's the really important point, Mr. Speaker, what's more, that evidence showed that no demographic group in particular was impacted by this requirement to bring ID. She knows it's true. She's shaking her head, but she knows it's true. Perhaps this is part, actually, of the pattern that we see here from the Labour Party, which is saying one thing and doing another. She still cannot explain why it is that many constituency Labour parties require this for their own selection meetings. She cannot explain why these are why these are acceptable powers that were passed by the last Labour government. She cannot explain why the last Labour government did this in Northern Ireland. She cannot explain why her colleague, the Minister at that time, said that this measure would tackle electoral abuse effectively without disadvantaging honest voters. They cannot explain any of these things, and that's just not good enough. Now, let me turn to the detail of what she has tried to put forward. Amongst her scaremongering and, frankly, conspiracy theorising, she has made reference to the costs of this year's measures, and I would like to make clear to the House that, through correspondence with the PACAC Select Committee, I have been clear on how those costs will be able to be accounted for. She asks whether we can allow time for a full debate on this in Parliament. I would beg advice from the Chair, perhaps, but to suggest that this is that to debate. And moreover, the powers which the last Labour government put in place allowed for this to be done in this way, without any such debate. So if she has that problem, she ought to have taken it up with her colleagues of that time. Finally, she asks, what are we expecting to see this year? Now, what we're expecting to see this year is that voters will be able to cast their ballots in a way that is protected. And she, I think, does down voters by suggesting that in some way this is an attack on them, and I think her phrase was some kind of privileging of the political class. That is simply not the case. What we are engaged in here is the breadth of the work that we need to do to keep our elections safe and secure and to update them for the 21st century. If she thinks we should not be doing that, she is welcome to live back in the 19th, but I think we should not be doing so. I think we should be making sure that voters can cast their votes in a way that is protected, in a way that means they can have confidence that they are not being usurped in their role. And finally, she asks whether we should be focusing on some crime that has small numbers. Well, really, I ask her whether she would have said that decades ago about, for example, rape. Would she have said that about a crime that was underreported? Would she have said that about some crime that has small numbers simply for the sake of it having small numbers? Of course she would not. Nobody would do so because, of course, it would be disgraceful to make that argument, wouldn't it, Madam Deputy Speaker? It would be disgraceful to make that argument if that was the argument somebody were making about small numbers. And that is the argument that that side is making about small numbers. Crimes of small numbers should not be ignored. They should be nonetheless protected against, and that is what we are doing.
Sir Desmond Swayne.